very much, and a very warm welcome and good afternoon today to my thesis defense about digitalization in wealth management, and with a case study about internationalization for a Swiss wealth management provider in Brazil and South Africa. First, I want to go through the facts, figures, and the problem statement with you, and then we will discuss the research question, literature review, and I will show you the gaps. Then I will explain the research design, and last but not least, I will then present the results of this study. The relevance of the financial sector for Switzerland is still very important. It's about 10% of all jobs involved directly or indirectly for Switzerland. And wealth management as part of the financial sector, so wealth management, which is the business for the high net wealth individuals, is very much important for Switzerland within this sector. 3.7 trillion assets under management are managed in Switzerland, of which about 62% stem from foreign countries. The cross-border business is very important within the wealth management, as seen before, and Switzerland is still the largest wealth management provider for all over the world. The transformation of the financial sector has started. The banks start to work more with ecosystems. They use digitalization to transform their processes and procedures. And the impact of digitalization also has possible impact of the costs of the employees in the future, which nowadays are about 65 to 75%. Talking about challenges in the current situation within the financial sector and wealth management, the business model is still very conservative, but the regulation and cross-border guidance has changed a lot. So nowadays, companies need a lot of time to invest to make sure that they are managing everything correctly with the countries they work with, which also drives to high costs within the wealth management. There is still a shortage of digitalization in wealth management compared to other parts of the banking system in Switzerland. There are more or less 12 times less investments done into digitalization in wealth management compared to other sectors. The business approach, therefore, is still very conservative, and normally the client has the main contact with his relationship manager and maybe an assistant, but not really direct access to further information except through the relationship manager. COVID-19 has worked as an accelerator for digitalization. During COVID, the banks were able to digitalize at least their onboarding services, and also some of them were even able to digitalize more of their processes. Looking into these challenges the wealth management sector in Switzerland has, and looking into the existing literature, I then came up with the research questions I wanted to look further into. How can a Swiss private bank add value using digitalization in the internationalization process for emerging markets? And as sub-questions, how can digitalization add value in the customer life cycle of customers based in emerging markets? The second sub-question, what digital strategies could work in international wealth management for emerging markets? When we look into the literature, there is a lot of academic journals and information and literature available about banking and wealth management, about digitalization, and also about internationalization. Many of these academic journal articles are also related or combining one with the other. However, there is a gap between the three of them. No journals or no academic literature is available about digitalization within wealth management for internationalization. Also relevant theories available are related to one or two of these topics, and I've shown you the ones I used during my thesis. And one of the most important to look into was then the Uppsala model from 1975, the original one with the process of having subsidiaries abroad, the 4 stages of internationalization, to say it like that. The reason why this is interesting also for wealth management or banking is that the internationalization process for banks is quite complex. You need to have the correct licenses abroad, and you need to have the right people to start to work with the background and the knowledge, as well as the customer network. Therefore, the decision to go abroad is very conservative, normally with banks, which is similar also to companies in a more industrialized setup. When it comes to the research design, I've chosen a single case study because I had access to the employee I work with, the company I work with, and therefore I was able to access a very interesting single case study object I wanted to conduct my studies within. And I've chosen a single case study with 2 embedded units of analysis. One is wealth management for Brazil, and the other one is wealth management for South Africa. I've chosen an inductive approach which reaches to build theory from observation, and then the Joya method, which is very helpful for qualitative research to make sure to reach the requested rigor in the study. Some key figures about Brazil. Brazil is still one of the largest ultra-high net wealth individuals market in the world, and the bank offers their relationship managers traveling to the country to visit their customers. However, the bank is not specifically licensed within Brazil. All of the services they offer are based on cross-border regulations, and in 2022 they started to collaborate with a local fintech to offer customers based in Brazil, which are not specifically high net wealth individuals yet, but younger generations, for example, to use the app of Switzerland within the app of the fintech in Brazil. So they had access to international financial markets and to start to invest globally. South Africa is the strongest wealth management market in Africa. Even though the number has declined a little bit due to political circumstances, it's still the largest market, and the bank has their license onshore as a representative office. 9 relationship managers are traveling frequently to South Africa. They still work out of Switzerland, but also do offer the investment app. But in that case, with South Africa, they offer it directly to the end clients. The data collection, I did a triangulation of 3 different methods. Observation, I was able to, for 3 years, to collect data internally, observing meetings, projects, and workshops. Expert interviews, I executed 17 interviews with experts within the field and was able to gain 874 quotes of them. And last but not least, I also collected internal data, secondary data from the company, from internet article, studies, and also client service within the bank, and I was able to write 30 protocols about that. To have a quick overview about the interview process, I executed these interviews from 2022 January to April 2022. All the experts are either experts in the field of digitalization, South Africa market, or Brazilian market, and work already within these areas for a long time. As mentioned before, I used the Joya method. I had several first-order concepts, which I then put into second-order themes, and then used the aggregated dimensions, where I focused on different impacts of this transformation process. So one is external triggers of transformation, such as, the most common one or the most well-known during the last years was, of course, COVID. But then also within the wealth management context, so impacts which happens within the wealth management industries. and also the organizational response. What is the impact, or what is also the response from the company towards these effects? Some interesting quotes from these interviews I would like to share with you before presenting the final results. For example, there is one which is very interesting in regards to resilience from customers, but also when it comes to resilience from employees. The employees, and for me that was also very interesting to see, they were not very afraid of losing their jobs in the future, but they realized their job profile will change. But they saw it much more as a positive impact from digitalization, to have more time for the personal contact with the customer, instead of fear of losing their job. When it comes to the customers, it was interesting to see that in emerging markets, clients normally are very open-minded towards digitalization, because compared to Europe, for example, where we have a lot of infrastructure, we are just very used to have it, such as a functioning mail system, or having your bank in every corner of your village. In emerging markets, often this is not the case. So when you live in a rural area, you are much more depending on digitalization, or if you have to do kind of a process with the government or something, it's much more complex. So digitalization there is very much welcome. However, when it comes to wealth management, there is much more fear of stealing the data and data security. So that was something for me which was very interesting to have a look into and to understand a little bit more. As mentioned before, we had the pre-transformation identity with the challenges. We went through this whole transformation process as part of the digitalization and internationalization process, to then identify a post-identity, which is more or less summarized a hybrid approach, which means that digitalization is very much interesting for wealth management, for administrative tasks, which are more and more increasing. So if you can use it to reduce the paperwork, to reduce the time you invest into, it's very helpful. While it also helps for regulatory requirements, to have tools available which can already match the different requirements from the different countries. For example, if you enter a trade and you are sure that you fit in with all the regulations you have in the specific country. On the other hand, the hybrid approach also leads to that customers as well as the relationship managers still believe and want to have the personal connection to each other, which is very much key in wealth management, which of course is much more tailor-made instead of retail banking, for example. And last but not least, from a business-to-business perspective, the digitalization is seen as an opportunity to raise more brand awareness internationally in certain markets, such as Brazil or South Africa, while using the app to collaborate with local fintechs and therefore also access customers which might not yet be the potential customers for the bank. However, you never know, maybe in 10 years they do sell their business or they grow their wealth, and then they could be finally also a potential client for a wealth management provider in Switzerland. When we go into the details of the client lifecycle, it's very much important to see that during the onboarding phase, where I mentioned before, there's a lot of paperwork, there is the most added value. So onboarding and relationship maintenance, there, the interviews and also the data shows that there is the most importance and most impact. Acquisition and closing are still very much seen as to be more traditional and therefore more analog. And as quickly mentioned before, B2B, there is potential when it comes to collaboration with local fintechs, and B2C to stick to the current business model, but using much more digitalization to facilitate the different processes. All of these findings I then put together in a management recommendations. There are different ones. Here one, which just mentioned before about the different resilience topics, is technology. The suggestion there is to really focus on data protection and security to make sure that the customers feel safe and can trust the processes of the bank which are digitalized. From a theoretical contribution, it's important to see that digitalization can add value to wealth management in international countries. It is important to use it in the right way to reduce administrative tasks. And a second, B2B collaboration and brand awareness can be raised by digitalization as well. Additionally, I also added further details to the existing Uppsala model. So I added the impact for wealth management directly, as well as for wealth management using digitalization. As always, there are certain limitations. I did the interviews with experts within the company. There could be a certain bias, of course. I only had 3 years for the research. It could be very much interesting to continue this research. And it was very industry specific. So it's wealth management. It cannot be compared to retail banking or another sector within the banking industry. And the limitations were on Brazil and South Africa in that case study. However, all of these limitations in the end lead to future opportunities to conduct future research and include, for example, also the customer perspective and many other suggestions. To conclude, focusing on a hybrid digital model using digitalization to reduce the administrative workload for customers as well as for the relationship manager is the approach to go on a business to customer level. And if you look into business to business, then it could be considered to also work together with local fintechs, knowing the local market, having the local licenses and everything in place, and also the local network to find a way to enter a market with an existing digital solution, which should then be provided by the Swiss wealth management provider as an USP. That would be my presentation, and I will sit down now to receive all your questions and inputs.